for this show. All righty, it is Sunday, Black August, and you are here with me, Friday Jones, and the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, bringing you another episode of Black Civics. Today is a pop-up. We freestyling it, so it's going to be some production things that you are going to see just because this is a pop-up. But we wanted to talk about the 300 Black women losing their jobs. I want to shout out Dana Dorsey, who is the show's producer, who said, hey, we got to talk about this. And so we wanted to bring it to you through a reparations lens. Excuse me. Water. I apologize. It's early, you guys, and it's early. It's early. In any event, let's get right into it because we have a lot to cover. I want to cover these 300 Black women, but I first want to point out, if you remember in April, there was a news report of 100,000 jobs having been lost. Dana, can we pull up the clip of the 100,000 jobs that were lost? Okay. And so in this 100,000, this is the 300,000. We'll go to this one next. The 100,000 is right next to it. Okay. So in April, when it came out that 100,000 jobs were lost, it was Black women lost 106,000. They're calling them extra jobs. I don't know about extra jobs because they were primary jobs among all workers, meaning it was going across all workers, and in theory, it was going across all industries. Now, let's go to the $300,000 job loss image. And this Revolt posted this. Nearly 300,000 Black women have lost their jobs in just 3 months amid DEI rollbacks, and they're trying to tie it to DEI. And I'm not sure that that's the right thing to do. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I want to get into this article from MSN. And MSN basically, when they get into it, hold on, if I can hit the right share button. Okay, can we take the other image down, Dana? So MSN has this headline, 300,000 Black women have left the labor force in 3 months. And it's not a coincidence. For decades, and I think MSN actually hit the nail on the head, they talk about the public sector and how it has been a lifeline for Black women who have been shut out of economic opportunities. And translation, what that means is the public sector does not have a lot of Black women in particular in C-suite jobs. The public sector does not necessarily have a lot of Black women in upper management or middle management. And a lot of this loss that you saw come from the public sector. It's no surprise that Trump's federal downsizing targeted them first, explains the gender economist Katika Roy. That I know to be true. I know this to be true because I have a friend who works for Social Security. She's one of the people who helped write Social Security actual legislation. I have another friend who works for immigration, who helped write immigration policy for the United States. I have a third friend who works, I think, in NHR, National Health and Research. And these are all government jobs. They're not necessarily all based in Washington, D.C., but one is based in Louisiana, one is based in New York State, the other one is based in Washington, D.C. All of the federal workers, if you remember and if you recall, were given the option to retire early. Who do you think they were retiring? So let's get into this. I'm going to click on this research because the research comes from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics. They have economic news releases. This is employment status of the civilian population by race, sex, and age. And so they did a year-to-year comparison. And what we're talking about largely is kind of what happened on this side, even though these are seasonally adjusted numbers, what happened here, because in each month, these are the numbers that were reported, and it's during this window of time, again, from April, 106,000 job losses to July, where we see it. And on the left-hand side, we see the race and the ethnicity. And so we're going to go down to this Black or African American. We're going to skip by the men, but I do want to say, if you look at the men from year 1 to year 2, and then through this period of time, ironically, you're seeing the numbers kind of, they start in the 600s, they dip a little to the 500s, but there were gains for Black, not gains for men. The numbers grew for Black men, okay? The numbers of unemployment actually grew. It started at 600,000, dipped to 500,000, and then increased to 700,000. So I don't want, even though we're focusing this because the headlines focused on Black women, I don't want there to be a misconception that Black men weren't hit. Because we know typically if one of us is hit in terms of gender, the other is also hit. So when we go here and we're going to focus here on the women, right? And unemployment, again, if you look at our column headlines, this is year to year. So this is July 2024 to July 25 in this first section, and then the months as they go by from March, April, May, June, and July, okay? And as we stay back again to Black women, here we see from 2024, we're at 688,000. By 2025, we're here at 800,000 in terms of unemployment, right? And so when you see the job loss from a month-to-month basis, we're going 500, 600,000. And that 600,000 seasonally adjusted is the real number, is this 800,000. So you're going from 500,000 to 800,000, from the 600,000 to 800,000. And so when you're looking at 500,000, how did they get to 300,000? Because they started looking at March, April, May, June, and July. In this July, here we are in terms of job unemployment, we're at 800,000. And so that's how they got to this 300,000 number. And just to get into the MSN article, it's not a coincidence. It's a result of federal policy choices who most immediately sweeping job cuts across public sector agencies where Black women have long held the strongest foothold in middle-class employment. This includes the Postal Service, people. This includes the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services, where I said I had a friend, and yes, she took the retirement because she saw the climate in the workplace and it had become quite hostile. They all have dramatic reductions in staff, up to 50% in some cases. These are not institutional losses. They represent the disappearance of stable, often well-paying jobs that historically provide economic security to Black women and families they support. No lie, government jobs are great. You get time off, you get federal holidays recognized, you are compensated. And as you move up from the F1, they have different G1 up to G15. If you stay with the federal government and you do your job well, you continue to be promoted. And once you start hitting, G10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 pay scale, you're making real money. You're able to maintain your family, your household, and so on and so forth. We're going to continue with this article. For decades, the public sector has served as a lifeline for Black women shut out of opportunities elsewhere. Remember, they're not in the C-suites. Black women make up over 12% of the federal workforce, almost double their share in the labor force overall. So in public world, that means that we represent only 6% of the labor force. But in the public sector, not in the private sector, in the public sector, we're at a whopping 12% of the federal workforce, right? And again, it offers pensions, benefits, equitable pay that the private sector does not comparatively have, right? And so wage gaps remain largely in that private sector, but there's cushioning in working for the federal government. That infrastructure is now eroding at pace beginning in early 2025. A wave of federal downsizing justified as efficiency reforms. Remember, we had Elon Musk. That's why people have stopped buying his cars in retaliation. But through his efficiency reform, it has disproportionately hit jobs in education, health, community-facing roles. So that means like your CPS workers, your social justice workers that may be at hospitals, maybe social advocates at hospitals. These are where these jobs are being hit. These are the very sectors where Black women are concentrated. As the federal budget shrinks, the effects ripple through state and local governments, where Black women are also employed in administrative jobs at the DMV. When you go to renew your car, these are state agency jobs. When public school funding dries up or health departments are hollowed out, it's often pink collar jobs held by Black women that are on the chopping block. DEI being dismantled at the same time. And I think they put it in proper order. Revolt wanted to make DEI the headline. I think the headline, MSNBC got it right in that it's in the public sector, government jobs, state jobs, education, and health. DEI. At the same time, we've witnessed an aggressive rollback of diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI programs across federal government and private sector. And here in Los Angeles, Black student achievement, something that was fought for due to the inequity that was happening in the education of Black children in Los Angeles Unified School District, they get a letter from a conservative white group who feel like somehow their child is being disenfranchised by not being part of the BSAP program. And they literally take the word Black out of the money, $125 million that was set aside for Black children due to harms that were done. And I have to ask LA Unified School District, where are your attorneys? Where is the pushback to this argument? The 14th Amendment and equal protections work in a way where if there has been documented harm, you actually can do reparative harm and stand it up to that 14th Amendment. And instead of doing that, LAUSD caved. We also saw the caving happening across the country. JP Morgan Chase had a program of funding and lending that was targeted to Black home ownership based on harms. And we know JP Morgan financed some of the slave trade and was doing insurance and all kinds of things back in the day. We know that that's the role that JP Morgan has played in our community. And instead of JP Morgan, who I know has general counsel like any other Fortune 500 company, coming on board and saying, you know what, we stand up to the fact that we have caused harm in this community. We're going to stand up our DEI roles at our bank. We're going to stand up the funding that has been allocated to make sure that these people participate in the largest wealth builder known in the United States. We're going to continue our program. That's not what they did. They softened it. And we're seeing it happen, and we're seeing it thanks to attorneys like Ed Bloom, who just keep moving the freaking bar. And then us Black people are catching up, but we're never catching up in the third arm of government, which we know is the court system. I want to get into this student borrower protection program to layer on the deep dive into the state of student debt and the crisis for Black women, right? So this article written around Juneteenth, research was done by the Education Trust, NAACP, and some other groups that documented the unique experiences of Black women and what they face in the student loan and higher education system. The work highlighted in this deep dive has shed light on the ways that higher education financing to the detriment of Black women's overall well-being and ability to build wealth. The bottom line is we're looking at 1 and 2 generations having student debt at the same time, and it's sinking Black families. It's sinking Black families. I don't want to get into the history of Juneteenth, and we know what that's about. But I do want to read, here we go. I want to get into this 1.7 trillion. Okay. Decades, student debt has inhibited borrowers from building wealth, buying homes, starting families, all the things that we know. For decades, Black women have obtained undergraduate and graduate degrees at the highest rate, yet face relentless discrimination in labor. That's why they're in the public sector. Okay. As a result, Black women hold a disproportionate share of the $1.7 trillion student debt and have higher overall balances than any other demographic because they get the education and then they can't get the damn C-suite job in the private sector where we represent 6% of the workforce. Okay. We're supposedly 15% of this nation's population. But when we go into the private sector, we're only 6% of that workforce. Okay. We're only at 12% when it comes to government. The experience of Black women, in particular, Black women with debt, has been elevated to the forefront of policy over the past few years, okay? The changes ushered in by the Biden administration, I don't know. They're talking about debt relief. I got 2 kids I put through college. Ain't no debt relief come my way. I'm footing those bills. In any event, let's talk about how the student debt perpetuates the racial wealth gap. 41% of white college-educated families who receive inheritance compared to only 13% of Black families, right? Which significantly lowers the stress of figuring out how to pay an education for white borrowers. Black borrowers are strained, and so are their families. This includes the fact that the typical white family has $100 in wealth for every $15 held by a typical Black family, and that 20% of all Black households have zero. 20% of all Black households have zero or negative wealth, right? So we basically are wealthless people. Okay, when it gets into the borrowing part for school, the vast wealth disparity between Black and white households result in Black student loan borrowers shouldering larger burdens so that they can have a chance at wealth. So they bidding for a chance to get jobs that they don't get due to discrimination. For undergraduate education, Black students on average take out approximately $39,500 of undergraduate student debt compared to $29,000 for white borrowers. Remember, this is white borrowers who have $100 for every $15 you got. This creates a double bind, higher debt for a credential with the added risk of not seeing a return on their investment due to the barriers that continue to permeate American society and hinder the progression of Black women due to systemic racism that exists within housing, labor, healthcare, and every other sector of the American economy. Thus, the racial wealth gap often leaves Black borrowers in a deeper hole than white borrowers. So it just continues. And then it gets into this where I live, right here. This is where my reality is. Furthering the intergenerational nature of student debt, Black student loan borrowers are disproportionately more likely to hold a Parent Plus loan. Parent Plus loans are federal student loans made to the parents to pay for their children's graduate education. And I just want to remind you, while you as the parent are taking out a loan, your kid is also taking out a loan. So now the federal government is binding 2 generations at one time to debt. These loans intended for high income families who could not afford to pay for college up front and had caps on the amount they could borrow are now used by more parents with low incomes and wealth to pay for full price of tuition and other college costs, because for many families, financial aid no longer covers nearly enough. Even if a borrower's expected contribution is zero, a lot of Black borrowers and parents must take this debt to pay for education. I'm one of those parents. People wonder why I drive an old car, because my kids are my car. I can't afford a new car. The loans are exhausting for Black women to take on. Okay, and then they get into a single Black mother of 3 who had to use these loans to fund her daughter's secondary education, just to be crushed with over $300,000 in debt years later. Why? Because she put the kids through school. You put multiple kids through school, that $39,000 continues. And if you are not paying down and paying down and paying that interest, it accumulates and accrues, and it does become crushing. I want to move now from that conversation to what happened with the Muscogee Nation and the court ruling for descendants of enslaved people that the court deemed are entitled to citizenship. And this is important as it relates to us. The Muscogee Nation Supreme Court, their Supreme Court, which is equivalent to United States Supreme Court, on Wednesday ruled that 2 descendants of people once enslaved by the tribe are entitled to tribal citizenship. The court found that the Tribal Nation Citizenship Board violated an 1866 treaty when it denied applicants of Rhonda Grayson and Jeffrey Kennedy in 2019 because they could not identify a lineal descendant of the tribe. Are we a nation bound to treaty promises made so many years ago? Today we answer in the affirmative, because this is what Muskogee law demands. The court wrote in its opinion, okay? The Muskogee Nation is one of 5 tribes, the Confederate tribes, also known as the civilized tribes, in Oklahoma that once practiced slavery, and that in the 1866 treaty with the U.S. government, the tribe both abolished it and granted citizenship to formerly enslaved people. But in 1979, the tribal nation adopted a constitution that restricted membership to the descendants of people listed as Muskogee Creek Indians by blood on the Dawes Rolls, a census of members of the 5 tribes created around 1900. Why is this important, you ask? And I'm going to see if I can stop sharing for a minute. And I want to actually hop into, gosh, where did I put it? This one. I want to hop into this screen. Okay, so bear with me as I get this open for you. But the closest thing that American freedmen have with the Muscogee and the court case that just happened with them is this. And it's what we hear, Field Order 15 and the what do you call it? The 40 acres and a mule comes from this Field Order 15 that was written by General William T. Sherman. And I want to get into it a little bit, and I'm going to see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Oh, it's not working, but let's go through these highlights, okay? This was written on January 16th, 1865, during the Civil War by Union General William T. Sherman, okay? 400,000 acres of land to newly freed Black families in 40-acre size segments. At Beaufort, Hilton Head, Savannah, Ferdinand, St. Augustine, and Jacksonville, the Blacks may remain in their chosen or accustomed vocations, but on the islands and in the settlements hereafter established, no white person, whatsoever, unless military officer and soldiers detailed to duty, will be permitted to reside and the sole and exclusive management of the affairs will be left to the free people themselves. What does that mean, people? And a lot of people haven't read this fully. They're so stuck on the 40 acres and the mule. What this was granted by General Sherman in the United States at the time was self-governance, a mechanism for self-governance that we don't have when we have been a permanent minority in this country since the Civil War. You can't be part of a democracy if you're a permanent minority within the governing process, which we are. And people don't talk about this often enough, but we doing reparations here with the National Assembly of American Slave Descendants, like the Black Civics Collective, like the video. Follow us, share this video so that people start to think about our existence in this country in a different way. Whenever a Negro has enlisted in the military service of the United States, he may locate his family in any one of the settlements at their pleasure and acquire a homestead and all other rights and privileges to settle. So basically, all our Black men, if your family's anything like my family, and I always say my family should have as much accolades as the McCain family, which we know to be conservative and white. John McCain got to crash a plane, but he still somehow maintained his ranking in the U.S. military. But all the Black men that were denied GI Bills, had this Field Order 15 stood up, not only would these men who are patriots, who are veterans, who stood up for American democracy on our shores and abroad, these men would be entitled to land of their choosing because of their military service. And then I want to get to this last part, but no one, unless an actual settler as above defined, or unless absent on government service, will be entitled to claim the right to land. So we had a whole system where we were given land, self-governance, so on and so forth. This is the closest, and it is on par. If you go look at the 5 civilized tribes, the Seminole, Cherokee, Choctaw, Creek, and Muskogee, if you go and you look at their treaties, our treaty in a way mirrors that. We were given as citizens of the United States a parity with those freedmen. There are Choctaw freedmen. There are Muskogee freedmen. You see it. You see it in the article. There's Muskogee freedmen. There's Seminole freedmen. But somehow when it comes to us and this concept of American freedmen, we are beat down over our heads as if we have no self-agency, as if we have come up with these ideas outside of, the realms of what existed on paper in essentially contracts, statements by our United States government that Congress later rejected. Congress rejected Field Order 15, but this was law. And it still should be law. And the foundation of reparations has to be built on this, based on that 13th and 14th Amendment that freed the slaves, that made us citizens. The United States has to stand on its contract, and it has not, period. And I want to make sure, I need to switch gears again, and I need to quickly go to this announcement from NARC, and we got to remember, we got to always follow the bouncing ball. Dr. Cheryl Grills became a commissioner for NARC during the California AB 3121 hearings, where she was a seated task force member, where she at the same time became a commissioner of NARC, and she imputed these beliefs into that task force. And it is the matter that Californians like me, who have been advocating, who helped Dr. Shirley Weber, Marcus Champion and Chris Logson work with Dr. Shirley Weber to actually input the American freedmen and the descendants of slaves into the language for the AB 3121 task force, to prioritize the harms that were done to us, to actually put us on parity with that Sherman's Field Order 15. Is people like Dr. Grills that we have constantly been fighting and battling for what is already ours. And so I'm going to go to this clip where we're going to talk about this, because it to me is it's problematic. It's problematic on so many levels. Let me get to this. And a shout out to Re-Ups for posting this, because people are against lineage reparations. And I shared with you all on my social media how, again, Dr. Grills has found herself on the board of organizations like Decolonizing Wealth. We have, Robin Rue Simmons, who was on the board and the funding strategy for Liberation Ventures. We have Nkechi Taifa, who I believe was on approval boards for both, and Jam Anniawar was on the board for Decolonizing Wealth. These are the women who are part of organizations like NARC and NCOBRA who are against lineage. They are against the idea of American freedmen, but you would never hear any of these organizers be against Muskegee freedmen. They would never speak about the case that was just shared. They would never speak against Choctaw and Cherokee freedmen, but they speak full chest out against American freedmen. And it does not make sense to me. NARC issued this, and this stands for, I think it stands for National. I don't see the top of it, but National African American Reparations Commission. These people came up with an organization, self-appointed themselves as authority. They're not part of any election process. They certainly aren't part of Field Order 15, where there's a governing body of us, by us, for us, where we have elected any of these people to these positions. They are self-appointed. We advise against reparations programs, and the title is Avoiding Nativism in the Reparations Movement. We advise against reparations programs that are too restrictive for large-scale reparatory justice initiatives. So-called lineage-based reparations are a form of limited access reparations that create additional barriers for Black communities to achieve comprehensive and full reparations. This leads to additional harms. Nativist and limited access reparations models, when suggested to address the extensive crimes against humanity endured by descendants of enslaved Africans and other people of African descent in the United States of America, failed to address the continuous systemic violations due to the legacies and manifestations. And it goes on. I don't have the of slavery. The full manifestation of slavery. Okay, here's my problem with this, and I'm my problem with this. Let's stop sharing. My problem with this is so-called lineage reparations form limited access. I'm going to make it plain. Everybody is not an American freedman. That's just what it is. No one goes. All these Black people that moved to the United States from different places, and I have been very plain. I think Rihanna might be my cousin because my great-grandfather is a Fenty from Barbados, okay? There's also someone who I think was a former mayor of Washington, D.C., who's a Fenty. His family's from Barbados. I'm pretty sure we're related. I ain't never met neither one of them. Pretty sure we're related. My great-grandfather came here in, I think it was 2012. He served in the U.S. military. He married a Shinnecock woman. So I have one grandparent that is not a descendant of U.S. chattel slavery, because mom is Shinnecock, dad is from Barbados, okay? Outside of this, and they would be part of this protections that NARC is talking about. But how many Black immigrants have tried to immigrate to the Muskegee Nation? How many Black immigrants from around the world have tried to immigrate to the Cherokee Nation or the Seminole Nation or the Choctaw Nation or any of the other? We here in California, we got plenty of indigenous tribes. How many Black people or foreign people, period, have ever tried to immigrate to any of these nations? They have not. And even if they had, and even if these nations were looking for other people, if they had done that and they had tried to immigrate, would they be given the exact same rights of citizenship as those Choctaw freedmen? The Choctaw freedmen, the Seminole freedmen, the Muskegee freedmen, the Creek, they all have a treaty that has to be honored, period. The treaty speaks for what is. And nothing can be taken away. We had in this country civil rights laws from 1866 ourselves that came with federal protections that nobody wants to talk about. We had civil rights from, I think it's 1870 and 1871, that came with enforcement responsibilities of the federal government. These are the things that we as American freedmen who had families and lineage that have experienced harms on this soil, that have experienced harms multi-generations, through multiple generations. And we are our own class and classification. And that is okay. As a commissioner, and these are my words, not my words as a commissioner, but through my experience as being a commissioner for the city of Los Angeles and looking at the harms that were documented for the city of Los Angeles, there were 3 classifications that I advocated for because they were the right things to do. And there's no way in this advocacy that NARC is doing where they are calling it nativism. They're almost trying to other us and make us like somehow white supremacists when full Nation of Islam has wanted separation for years. And their approach to the reparations in Nation of Islam has been what might be called a nationalistic perspective, because they want separation from the dominant culture in this country. And so if you're going to have an honest conversation, you can't call it nativism. You are anti-lineage because you have established business relations in Africa. And we know this. I be talking about this stuff. I told you guys some years ago when Karen Bass was chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, her top 3 priorities were Africa. It was women getting out of prison and foster care youth. And who took her share, Cam Lager. Let me find this bill. I wasn't even going, this was not in my lineup. African Business Diaspora Bill. I wasn't even going to talk about this, but we're going to talk about it today because I'm on a roll. I got 15 minutes to try and get this all in. But let me share this Cam Lager text so y'all can see what's really going on, as we don't get no American freedmen bills, but we getting African diaspora business bills because it's a priority for former Congress member Karen Bass to establish HR 784, to establish an advisory council on African diaspora engagement in the United States and for other purposes. Okay? I've been trying to get a meeting with member Cam Lager. She's my congresswoman. She came through Los Angeles African American Women's Political Policy Institute, has been there to teach other Black women how to be in office and how to run for office and how to uphold other women who want to run for office. Okay, this bill establishes an advisory council on African diaspora engagement in the United States and for other purposes. The act shall be called the African Diaspora Council Act. There shall be established a Secretary of State Advisory Council within the Department of State to be known as the Advisory Council of African Diaspora Engagement in the United States. It should consist of 12 members appointed by the Secretary of State who will represent and reflect diversity in the African diaspora from African American and African immigrant communities, including individuals who have distinguished themselves in government, sports, creative industries, business, academia, social work, faith-based activities. Appointments to the council shall be made without regard for political affiliation. Okay, they're going to serve 2-year terms. They're going to talk about business and the ways the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent can be a conduit for programs and initiatives to strengthen cultural, social, political, and economic ties between African communities, to address challenges and opportunities to advance inclusion, belonging to public awareness, and blah, 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 blah. I'm not knocking the bill. That bill is fine. The problem I have with this bill, and I'm gonna stop sharing and I'm gonna switch gears because I gotta wrap us up. But my problem with the bill is this. We're gonna go to the African diaspora, the UN. We're gonna go to the UN, okay? And then we're gonna go to what has not been done here while we're moving this forward. The report on the report of the Permanent Forum of People of African Descent. This is from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Okay, you can go pull this report up yourself. This report was done The Permanent Forum of People of African Descent was held in Geneva from the 5th to the 8th of December in 2022. Okay, and then there was a second session that was held in New York from 30th of May to June 2nd in 2023. Okay, and on the theme of realizing the dream, a United Nations Declaration on the Promotion, Protection, and Full Respect of Human Rights of People of African Descent. And we're going to fast forward. This is in the report, and this is where I call BS. And we did a side event. The National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants did a side event in 2024 in Geneva, Switzerland, on this very subject here, because the people like NARC act like they weren't in the same room, act like they didn't participate in this and help write some of these findings. But we're going to talk about, I want to say the sister's name, her name, oh, damn it, I didn't highlight her name. Ms. Namakula. Miss Namakula is the author of these words here that we're going to read. She identified political commitment as an essential driver for dismantling systematic racism and creating a new social contract that was fully inclusive of people of African descent. Ms. Mo Makgoro said that the collection, publication, and analysis of data disaggregated by race and ethnic origin were essential for reversing the invisibility of people of African descent and highlighting the systemic racism of which they were victims, including its manifestation in law enforcement and criminal justice. She emphasized that the states had an obligation under international law to eliminate all forms of racial discrimination, including systemic racism, and this implied the reform of institutions, legislation, policies, practices that might not be discriminatory in purpose, but were discriminatory in outcome and effect. Okay. And then it talks about Justin Hansford, Thurgood Marshall School of Law at Howard University, supports the call for disaggregation of data for the purposes of addressing systemic harm. So the UN says this. Justin Hansford, Thurgood Marshall, director at Howard University, affirms it. And then we have NARC and NCOBRA coming out against lineage reparations. What world of bizarro are we in? Who's serving who here? What's the hidden agenda that we're not seeing? Because this agenda to me seems like it's based on democratic platform policy, friendships, and alliances that have been forged that are self-serving. And then we get a law like Camlogger. What we don't get is what the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants, and I will post this link up so people who want to see the things that went to the Biden administration. But while Biden was in office, the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants went with demands. We wanted a reparations commission. We edited some things in HR 40 to make it specific to American freedmen. You dang skippy, we did. Why? Because we're standing up on Field Order 15 by General Sherman. We're standing up on the foundation of this country in 1776. Okay? We asked for truth and reconciliation hearings for American freedmen, for the descendants of chattel slavery here. Sheila, what is her name? From Northern California, Barbara Lee, not Sheila Lee, Barbara Lee, California. She actually did truth and reconciliation legislation for like all of the things that America has done. But we are saying prioritize us. The President Obama signed, I think it's 1315, Executive Order 1315 for a presidential advisory commission for the Asian and Pacific Islander community. But we don't have this for ourselves. And yet we got Sidney Camlogger writing similar legislation for a diaspora, an international business arm, but we ain't got no mechanism in the country for us to be inside to see what the government has going on so that we can disseminate it to our people. We don't have a Department of Freedmen Affairs. We don't have no Freedmen Affairs Bureau, but these people are getting a commission to do what we are not doing for our own American freedmen. Reaffirmation of affirmative action, creating a census designation for us. That's not othering us as Black and all sub-Saharan Black groups. We can do MENA, Middle Eastern, North African, who used to be white people when they came here, but they Black African people who got a MENA group, but we don't have a group that separates and disaggregates us. But we got the UN saying that's what we should do as people of African descent. We got Justin Hansford agreeing to it, but then we got NARC calling it nativist if we do. And then we got Mark Morial not standing on his square with the Urban League to say, yes, this is something that the standard 15 for the Office of Management and Budget needs to be updated to. What kind of nonsense are we living? We asked for guaranteed federal government contracting. We're talking about job losses. We asked for guaranteed SBA loans so that we can create our own businesses without debt. We also needed grants from SBA. And as we see these 300 Black women tumbling, and again, we saw the Black men tumbling in their numbers because their numbers were just a hair less, a third less, 200,000 jobs instead of 300,000 in a household. That means in households, we have 500,000 job losses. That's terrible. That's systemic failure. That is a society failing its citizens. I want to very, very quickly point out also that during our time, the first 100-day campaign, which kind of got swallowed up because of Al Sharpton and them striking against Target, and Target was on our first 100-day radar for a different reason, but we started building our campaign in August 31st after the saboteurs in California State. The Legislative Black Caucus of the state of California didn't bring reparations bills by Senator Bradford to head. We started this first 100 campaign the week after, built it for 6 months just to be overshadowed by what the big names, NAACP and NAN, what they were doing. But we went to Washington, D.C., looking at Trump's platinum plan. That's the plan he so-called wrote for Black people. And we went to Washington, D.C. We met with about 17 state legislators. And we talked about he wants to create 3 million jobs. Great. Let's get federal contracting mandate together where 20% of the contracts go to American freedmen-owned firms. You want $500 billion in access to capital? Great. Stand back up the Freedmen Bank that was stolen from us when the deposits from our Black Union soldiers were stolen, and so that it can be managed with SBA loans and financial literacy and tax code training so that we can actually have funding source for our Black businesses. Put that $500 billion in there and let us work it out. And then the families that y'all stole the money from, make them shareholders in the bank too. We wanted education support, title funding, pre-K through 12, serving American freedmen. We wrote legislation for this, okay? We wrote recommendations for this. HBCU funding, debt-free education, 75% enrollment requirement at HBCUs. Those HBCUs were started for the former enslaved, period. And we can barely access it. And to the point that we are accessing it, we can't afford it. And so I'm saying all of these things to you all today because I want to bring perspective to what it is that we are doing here. And we cannot stay with organizations like NARC and NCOBRA and these Democratic lawmakers. You know, I like Sydney Kamlager. I think she, you know, she's a fighter and I think that she speaks, but I've got to ask my congresswoman, what are you doing? Why are you not taking meetings with people who have beautiful policy? This idea of nativism as if it's a one shoe fits all. Like I said, as commissioner, there were descendants. There were people who were part of COINTELPRO, specific to like the Black Panthers that were dismantled, that needed their own classification because of the harms inflicted on them. Political prisoners were in Black August. They were listed as beneficiaries. And then the war on drugs, which is race neutral. Those are the three recommendations that I made personally as a commissioner for the city of Los Angeles. And so this idea that somehow American freedmen can't look at harms and can't look at what happened to other people, the thing is, we are self-advocating, and there's a difference. If there are other people who want to take up those mantles, who want to look at the different harms and who want to make those recommendations, that is why you have commissions. That is why you have diversity with commissions. We have 10 seconds. This was our pop-up. Like, share. We will talk to you next time. Black Civics Collective. I'm Friday Jones. Thank you so much. Oh, wait, we got 10 whole minutes. Okay, wait. So then I don't have to wind down so fast because I was hot closing it because, you know, we only got 59 minutes that we can run on here. So I'm going to stay on these last minutes. I don't know. I see we have people in the chat. I don't know if you all have any comments or questions, but if you have any questions or comments, let's see if we can get them in here and we'll talk about it. But I wanted to bring this whole thing back. And Dana, can we pull up Dr. Gamage's book? Dr. Gamage was our guest last week. She has a book, Media and Racism. Oh, I don't like the way that looks on screen. She has a book, Media, Racism, the Impact of Media Injustice on Black Women's Lives. When she was on the show with us, she talked about how she had some data for Black men and media and racism also. So I want to encourage you all to check out her book. I also want to encourage you all to make donations to the National Assembly of American Slavery Descendants. It's Black August. I want you all to stand in solemn remembrance of your advocates. And I also want you to remember that, and we can take this photo down, Dana. I want you all to remember the fact that you all have advocates that are fighting for you in real time. And just like I said, the NARC people were self-appointed. There are people in your community that you should be getting to know. The CJEC, you got to give them credit. I mean, they've held over 100 informational sessions in California, but the machine that moves the Democratic Party in California at times is stronger. And then they can tap into their networks. Isaac Bryant tapped into UCLA and his network. The Bunch Center, we want to talk about, again, the 3 classifications for the city of LA. The Bunch Center, Bunch was killed because of COINTELPRO. Okay. And there are people like me. There are people, this is thankless work, who advocate and who do real work, who don't sit on their YouTube channels talking smack about splinter groups, talking smack about people that's in these trenches moving the needle. U.S. Freedmen Project is in New York, working with member Nikki Lucas on trying to bring about change in a system that was built to literally be against us. We do not have to be apologetic to anyone, but you will stand, my brothers and sisters from diaspora, and you will respect our lives. You will respect the fact that this is Black August, that our political prisoners, and you can be made into a political prisoner overnight, because when we were in Sacramento and those pictures that you all saw with us talking in the rotunda where we were not allowed into the actual hearing, where our movements were restricted, where we had sheriffs. I'm 5'4". Them sheriffs had to be 6'4". They had to be 12 more inches than me in their cowboy hats with their hands on their holsters. When we went to Moreno Valley with what's his name, Member Jackson of the California State Legislature, who again called Moreno sheriffs on us. 10 cars pulled up, 20 officers jumped out. You can be made a political prisoner overnight. And how dare NARC and Ron Daniels issue such a vile statement? Because you know what? I ain't never seen him or his people unless they were sitting invited guests as a panel. I've never seen them toe to toe with us here in the state of California. I've never seen them at the state capitol fighting for us while they are writing against us. Words are like spells and incantations. And when you start getting into the spiritual realm, words matter. The word was God and was with God. It says something like that in the Bible. I paid a little bit of attention during Sunday morning lessons. In the beginning, right? In the beginning. So we need to think about the words that are said and aimed against us. What you often do not see, particularly with NAASD, we don't stand out fighting against Black people. We actually have pro-CARICOM policy that we teach. And the policy that we teach on CARICOM is that the United States government has an obligation to protect the reparations through CARICOM that might be coming through newly immigrated people. So we say, United States, you actually keep tabs on the people that you naturalize so that they can always be tied to the country that they came from to get their reparations. But people don't want to talk about that. They want to call us nativists and belittle and minimize. And if they say it enough, in enough rooms enough, like in Liberation Ventures, like in Decolonizing Wealth, they'll say it enough that they will force us to disappear. Just like I tell the white people, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my uncle who has Negro on his birth certificate ain't going nowhere. We know where we came from. We know our family histories and our family folklores, and our elders are dying off every day. We do not have time to wait. Legislation that wants to do a study for genealogy and wants to put Black kids on the front line for potential education that they still got to pay for. Well, we just saw you got 500,000 jobs in our households. I'm not doing the white thing, the Black women, the Black men. No, in our households, it's a collective loss of 500,000 jobs in 1 year. That's significant. That's over 10% of our population in this country. 10% of our households have lost jobs. That's huge. You don't get to play with our history and our legacy. You don't get to play as if in Zora Neale Hurston's book on that boat Catilda, the Barracoon, nobody's waving no damn red flag and we just walking in the way you want us to walk. Those days are over. And you have to respect in the way that the United Nations asked you to respect the disaggregation of data, Mark Morial. You have to respect it and not act like we're xenophobic because we are exercising things that are consistent not only with the United Nations, but consistent with our 13th Amendment, consistent with Sherman's Field Order 15. We have to be better. And we can unify, but we can only unify when we move in respect of each other and not self-hatred. There's a word for that, oaknophobia or something like that. We're not walking, holding ourselves in low energy vibrations. We are walking in the highest of energy vibrations with respect for all of our human conditions. Every human being has a human condition. The human experience is not easy, but we will not bow down. We will not self-deprecate. We will not self-depreciate our value and our humanity so that someone else can have. We have to figure out how we all, both, and, or not at all. And there's no expectation. You don't have a right in terms of someone else's life energy to demand that they also have to fight every fight that you have. Black people in this country have been having it since we set foot here, period. And my indigenous family, I don't know what y'all think they look like. They look like Black people too. And they've had a time since the settlers, the serfs, and the feudalists settled on this land too. And none of us have to bow down to anyone, period. I stand for American freedmen. I advocate for American freedmen. I honor my three grandparents, Mildred Jones, Ghost. We call him Ghost. That's my granddaddy. He was the original Ghost, not the dude on Power. But I honor William Ogburn. And I honor William Spencer. Those are my grandparents. I honor those families So peace and reparations. Until next time, this was a pop-up. We'll be doing some more during Black August because the revolution won't be televised. It'll be on YouTube. I'll talk to you all soon. Peace and reparations, family.